It's Go Lizard, Go Lizard, Go time. As this week we review the last two episodes of season 4 of Spider-Man, the animated series. This is the Superhero Pantheon. Now, on this podcast, usually we take three of the Fox Kids version of the Spider-Man the animated series that aired in the mid-90s for a little discussion and review. It's not for Pantheon eligibility. It's just a fun side project. My name is Brian the Brain. You can find me on Twitter at Brian the Brain. You can find additional episodes of this podcast through Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, all your favorite podcast apps on the real world. We strongly encourage a 4 or 5 star review here and there to support the folks at the real world. If you would like to interact with us, we're on Hero Pantheon, and my co-host for this week is Jerome C1985 on Twitter. And Jerome, I don't know, man, it feels like the phrase is usually jumping the shark, but I think this week we jumped the lizard, so to speak.
I have to tell you, I had a really weird experience going into these final 2 episodes because I was really looking forward to this. I was like, okay, we just got off 3 really hot episodes. Like Mary Jane's back. The female writers have really added so much to these episodes. This has been a really good season. I was super excited for the final 2 episodes, and I walked away incredibly disappointed with both episodes. I will say I did like the ending of episode 10, which we'll talk about. But Brian, I was profoundly disappointed in both of these episodes. Like, there was just some flat out bad stuff in both of them.
Okay, so I think what happened was Felicia Hardy leaving really hurt the show to the point where they had to do a jump the shark moment, it feels like. Because correct me if I'm wrong, did Richie leave after Fonzie jumped the shark or before?
I believe he left before.
That's what I'm saying. I think this is the case where they had such a hot character leaving the show in Felicia Hardy. It just killed the momentum. It really feels like it, because even the last 2 episodes, we were praising the writing on the previous episodes. No female writer on these last 2 episodes. This next episode, The Lizard King, Chapter 10, it goes really, really like backwards. It feels like going to that B movie feel that like the previous seasons kind of went to. But they're kind of, I don't know, just kind of like taking old sci-fi tropes and old movies like that and kind of rehashing it. Basically, the idea is it's Ninja Turtles with lizards, basically. That's kind of what the clue was on that opening, that Go Lizard Go opening, Ninja Turtles 2. Except this time, Dr. Connor's blood, I guess, somehow in the first season, went into the sewer. These lizards found the blood, and now they're mutated.
Here's my thing, Brian. This is pure speculation on my part. I don't know if there is a connection, but around this time, was there not a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles live-action series that was a part of Fox Kids? Do you think there could be a connection there?
I was thinking that too, because that's when they added that 5th turtle, that female turtle, and I think it was like 1 season. It might have been the same time as this, but I don't know. Maybe it was just a coincidence, because, I mean, you would think they would have this episode written out a year ahead of time, or maybe even 6 months ahead of time. So I think this is what, July of 97, this is when it aired. So in the hype of that. So you can see why they kind of took that idea of let's make, instead of turtles, let's make giant lizards talking and fighting each other. So it's a fun concept.
And they basically have their own fight. They basically have their own fight club, which I find to be really interesting.
Yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a second, because it was just so funny to me how they just did all that carpentry underground. But let's kind of start at the beginning, though, because at the beginning we had this cliffhanger at the end of episode 9 where Spider-Man took off his mask and he does reveal himself to be yes, he is Peter Parker. Mary Jane's kind of shocked, but then she accepts it. Same time, he proposes to her. She says yes, and as I say this, Mary Jane, air quotes around the name, just a big clue for what's to come. They both go to Dr. Connors because apparently Dr. Connors is the only father figure left in their life, and I'm thinking like, holy shit, like. Despite this episode being like not that great, I think that one part was like really sweet and sad. But at the same time, it's like, wow, like out of all the people that's left, yeah, Dr. Connors is the only father figure left. So that kind of clues you in as to what might happen at the end, because like there's no way they can kill him at this point if he's the last father figure, right? And you want to have him give away the bride. So very interesting the way they approach that. But during all this, some random lizard people come and take Dr. Connors away underground, and we get some exposition about the background of the blood infecting these lizards in the sewer. God knows how many lizards are in the New York sewer, apparently, because there was a ton of them in this small little section that got infected. And apparently, I don't know, I guess it spread because there's like numerous talking lizard people, and we only see a few get infected. So who knows the DNA and the genetics of it all. But yeah, that's pretty much what happens. And then it looks like Mary Jane kind of gets away while Spider-Man is kind of fighting these lizard people underground. So Mary Jane goes to Margaret Connors, Dr. Connors' wife, and explains the situation. And she knows that there's this emergency weapon that just in case Dr. Connors loses control again and becomes the lizard, that uses this weapon to kill him. And even in the video that says, play this in case of emergencies or whatever, it says in the video, kill me with this weapon. But, female intuition, I feel like if this was they're kind of go for like the females are the heroes in this one, and I get it, but this female intuition, luckily the male writers got it right on this, where it's like, what if we don't kill him and we adjust this weapon somehow so it neutralizes him and not necessarily kill him, right? So they go to Deborah Whitman, who's still really hungover about Morbius, who's going through some really deep depression, apparently partying every night for like 2 weeks apparently. So that's a big red flag there, but she continues on and she helps out Margaret and Mary Jane, and they figure out that they could take this weapon and neutralize the lizard. So basically, they talked about the neogenics. Anyone with neogenics in the area is going to get, neutralized, which kind of contradicts the Spider-Man thing because he was in the area of the blast radius, but I guess he wasn't really affected, so that's fine. So all this kind of, craziness going through, and then underground people fighting, where Spider-Man is trapped, but for some reason the lizard people love to fight. And there's your underground fight club that Jerome was talking about. And I don't know, what do you think? How do they build all that stuff with the carpentry and the seating arrangements? And it looks like something straight out like Thor Ragnarok, but underground.
Except not nearly as entertaining, as not nearly as weird. Like, this episode just really stands out because I think this season has been slightly more grounded than the previous two. I mean, there's certainly been some wacky sci-fi things and whatnot, but it feels like this season has been so much more focused on characters than on some of the plot mechanics. Like, I don't know that the theme of season 4 has been as solid as season 2 and 3, but I feel like the episodes, pound for pound, have been so much better. And then this one just completely goes off the rails. And I understand, like, you want to bring the lizard back, like, you want to bring this character back. You're kind of going back to the beginning because he was the villain in the very first episode. A lot of the setup just did not work for me, and it was just profoundly bizarre watching this after everything that we had seen. And, like, just the way the episode begins, I just was like, oh boy, this is not going to be great, because everything just felt really rushed. The marriage proposal felt really rushed. And yeah, I wish I could say I enjoyed this episode, because I think there's a tragic element to Dr. Connors, the lizard, that I really appreciate. I love the fact that, he has been a character, not just a villain. Like, the lizard was a villain, but I love the fact that he has been such a prominent part of the series since then as a protagonist and as kind of one of Spider-Man's only friends / allies. So I really like that part of it. So, but it's just unfortunate that so much of the rest of this just doesn't hold up at all. Like, it doesn't. And it's really strange. and I don't really know like how we are going to be able to talk about the finale without, thinking about just everything that came before, and just like the fact that you not only have this underground fight club, but in a very short amount of time they have developed this society almost, and it's really weird. And part of me was like, are we kind of going for maybe like a Super Mario Brothers vibe, but everybody's a lizard? I guess in some ways this is what would happen if Lizard was successful in the first Amazing Spider-Man. Is the second. So if Lizard was successful in the first Amazing Spider-Man, second Amazing Spider-Man would have been Andrew Garfield going into the underground fight club and fighting lizards. That would have actually been better than Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Yeah, for sure, because that would be like such a horror kind of feel anyway. But for me, like, this seems like it would be up my alley. Like I love B movies, I love sci-fi horror and all that kind of thing, and I love cheesy B movies, but this just does not connect. It feels like he was regressing, to be honest, because we've seen Dr. Connors like evolve his character from going to like, I want to turn everyone into a lizard, to no, I need to be stopped. I need to be put under control. I need to help other people and use my genius to help other people and guide Peter Parker through his dilemmas and stuff like that. Here it's like as soon as he turns back into a lizard, he's like, I must turn everyone into a lizard again and rule as a lizard king. And it's like, whoa, dude, you just step back like way, like you just took like 4 seasons of like an arc and kind of retracted that. But I get it. He's transformed. He's not the same person. He's not, he's, I don't know if it's a hypnotic spell or whatever that lizard thing does to him, but it makes him obsessed with controlling the world. But unfortunately, he doesn't. He's unsuccessful. Thank God. Luckily, there's this one lizard woman. I didn't get the name, but she seems to be the most rational person of the bunch, because she realizes like Spider-Man kind of slips the word that like they're an accident. They were created on accident. They're not a purposeful creation. So, upon that philosophical revelation, she's just like, whoa, wait a minute. If we're an accident, why are we fighting each other like gladiators on the ground? Why are we living like this, like animals, when we can live like fulfilled lives, with our newfound powers and stuff like that, and this whole new philosophical look on life all of a sudden. And all of a sudden, like all the lizards stop fighting each other. But then, as the boys would say, girls get it done. So Deborah, MJ, and Margaret Connors all come in with the weapon. Surprisingly, did you see Deborah Whitman take down that lizard? Holy shit, what a tackle! And then they release the bomb, and the bomb neutralizes, and it neutralizes all the actual lizards to standard lizards, and then just transforms Dr. Connors back into being a human. And I don't know, one of the notes here on this page that I found on Wiki says that it completely healed him. I don't know if that's 100% true, because I don't even think we see Connors again, because Spider-Man in season 5 is going to be all over the place, like dimensionally wise. So this might be it for Connors. I don't know if this was his like send-off, but I want to say he's cured for forever now.
I guess we're going to find out in season 5 when we get to it. But all I can say is I did appreciate the girl boss moment. I think it was less clunkily done than some of the ones that have been done in recent MCU movies. And yeah, I think that the ending of this episode was undoubtedly the best part, because the rest of this was pretty rough. Like, there's no other way of saying it. It was just a very rough piece of animation, and it stinks because I wanted to come in and really enjoy this episode, but yeah, this one unfortunately did not deliver, and things do not get much better in the next one. The fact that it's named the Prowler is not a good sign.
Okay, so this one was tough, because I felt like the writer of the episode, I don't want to say the name because I don't want to bury him, but the writer of this episode felt like they were kind of doing the Tarantino thing of telling the story out of order. And I know around this time, and especially in like 97, that idea was kind of like new in writing. Not new, but like this like kind of fresh idea. Let's tell the story out of order. And in the Prowler, for the season finale, we see the Prowler, but he finds Peter Parker, and they're having this dialogue discussion. And it's almost like that cliche villain dialogue. Okay, so basically what happens with the Prowler episode in episode 11 is that it's told in flashback. And unfortunately, it just feels like, they were trying to do that Tarantino idea and just tell it out of order when it didn't really have to be. Because it opens with like the Prowler talking to Peter Parker, and Peter Parker and him are having this discussion, and it feels like, it's the villain monologuing pretty much for like 15 minutes of the 22-minute runtime of what his past was and how it interacted with Peter Parker. And it gets really, really convoluted. It kind of starts out with his name is Hobie, before he becomes the Prowler, obviously, and he's working for a Mr. Freeze knockoff. And I was just laughing my ass off because his name is Iceberg. And apparently he was fed up with his cut, and Iceberg tried to have him like killed off, but it failed. And then, like right after this incident, Hobie goes and steals a purse from Mary Jane. So happened to be Mary Jane, and the Peter's right there with him. So Peter goes off as Spider-Man and catches him. So he gets arrested that night, gets sent to prison, and Hobie in prison somehow randomly saves Wilson Fisk's son, right? So as a reward, Fisk gets him out of jail, and pretty much, again, loose laws in the Spider-Man animated universe. He gets him out of jail, gives him the Prowler suit, doesn't tell him that he needs to recharge the suit after a certain amount of time. So the Prowler goes back to Iceberg, takes over his hideout, but the suit starts failing. And then we get this cool, like one of the cooler parts of the episode that I only liked, this hologram messaging machine of Kingpin telling him that, like, hey, man, you're screwed because you got to recharge the suit. And the only way you can do that is through me. So you got to work for me now, blah, blah, blah. And then, he goes to Spider-Man for help, and they do a team up, and Prowler does this babyface turn, and, they go after Kingpin at the end. So it gets really convoluted. Iceberg's out of the picture now, but at the same time, I don't know, because the other problem is Prowler has this really toxic masculinity problem. While he's dealing through all this stuff about the suit and becoming the Prowler, he's trying to get back with his ex-girlfriend, and he throws the current boyfriend of his ex across the room. And I'm just like, dude, you just violated so many rules, man. And at the end, it was very uncomfortable because he was like, I'm going to try to get back with her anyway. And Spider-Man looks at the camera and just like, good luck with that one, buddy.
I cannot believe that you have such a tapestry of villains at this point, and this is your big finale, and this is how you end it. Like, maybe season finales are not as big of a deal for animated shows in the 90s, but this just felt extremely anticlimactic and like the complete opposite of something I would want from an episode like this. And I think the Tarantino structure works in a movie because you have 2 hours. You can't do this in a 20-minute animated show. Like, you can't do the back and forth because it's too jarring and it's too difficult to try to tell that story. So my philosophy is, if you want to have a flashback, brief, fine, but jumping around through time, this is not a very good idea. So I walked away pretty frustrated coming out of this episode. And it's funny because one of the things that I told Brian is that I asked Brian to host this week because I'm in the midst of doing some podcasting preparation for Better Call Saul, preparing to take a break in August, making sure all episodes are edited and whatnot. So I asked Brian to take on this week because there's only 2 episodes and he could take notes, and just taking the hosting duties off will help me pretty significantly. And I was like, you know what? Brian's going to get a good week. He's going to get 2 solid episodes, and then we'll be able to take our break, and then we'll be able to move on. Unfortunately, Brian, I'm sorry to say that you did not get 2 good episodes to host about. Sorry.
Well, I saved something special just for you. I had some hidden notes that I didn't send you because we've been doing this thing where he'll send me the notes, but I'll look up the voiceovers and not really tell him, and then I'll kind of spring it on him during the recording. So the Prowler, he's voiced by Tim Russ. Are you familiar with that name?
The name sounds familiar, but I'm not quite sure what else he's done.
He was one of the stars, I should say, on Star Trek Voyager as Lieutenant Commander Tuvok. Do you remember that?
What's funny is I have been watching the original Star Trek series. I am finished with it. I also completed Star Trek the Animated Series. I will be getting to Voyager eventually, but next up on the docket is, of course, The Next Generation, which I will be doing for a few weeks. So, unfortunately, that is not familiar to me, but maybe by the end of this calendar year, I will recognize that name and that voice.
Well, he does appear as a different character in, because I'm looking at the wiki now, as a different character in Generations. So you'll probably see him like really soon, actually. And then he's got the full run on Voyager. Voyager has 170 episodes. People, I don't know the plot, but from what I heard, I think this is the one where they get lost and they have to spend like years coming back to where they got lost from, or something like that. It's one of those Voyager shows that was like a journey type show and not necessarily a serial like the original Star Trek, where it was just kind of like episode to episode. It was kind of like this journey back. From what I heard, it was one of the better, like, surprisingly better Star Trek shows. So, not only that, I mean, he's been on tons of shows and tons of movies, obviously, because of his longevity. But I think the one thing that you're going to get a kick out of is that he had a really important role in Spaceballs as the desert combing trooper.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting, Brian.
Yeah, because as I was just thinking, like the desert combing trooper, I was like, oh yeah, the guy with the giant comb in the middle of the desert in Spaceballs. So, what a career for this guy! Like he's very into sci-fi and voiceovers, and yeah, I wanted to highlight him because he's got quite a career. And I'm looking at it. I was looking at it hours ago before the recording, and I was just like, God damn, he was even on iCarly as the principal. So even in the modern era, this guy's got roles. So if anything, I wanted to end this on a positive because these two episodes were not that great. And the Prowler, I was thinking it was going to be good considering that we saw the great arc that he had in Into the Spider-Verse, but they didn't really go with that route. So the modern writers kind of saved the character, I feel. But yeah, that's kind of it for season 4. Overall, I would say 7.5 out of 10, only because of the strength of the previous episodes, and then it just kind of takes a dive and a nosedive. But if the last 2 episodes were great, I would have said 8.5. But right now it's kind of at a 7.5. And I would kind of rank this along with season 2 as still like the top 2 seasons so far. Season 3 was had its moments, but then it had like its slow points. But I don't think anything is the top season 2, especially season 5 with like all the crossovers coming up. I think season 2 was still the most consistent. And my favorite episode this season, I don't know about you, but I think I know what you're going to say. Mine was Blade coming back with his mom and the whole vampire saga. But I think I know what you're going to say for your favorite episode.
Yeah, mine is actually the very next episode, which was about Harry and him becoming the Green Goblin. That is definitely my favorite of this of all the episodes. So yeah, it's a weird season because I think you really had some very high highs, but I think these last 2 episodes were very low lows. So it's unfortunate that we're ending on a low note, because I think if we were ending on a high note, maybe like last week we reviewed 2 episodes that weren't nearly as good, I think our perspective on this might be very different. But if I'm being honest, I think the things that work about this season are the character things. I think the female characters are written so much better. So I think from that perspective, this is definitely a really strong season. I would definitely rank this above season 3. I would probably maybe slot this around the same quality as a season 1, maybe even a season 2, just because I think that, again, I think episode 8 might not only be my favorite episode of the season, but also my favorite episode of the series. So I think that makes things a little bit different, and that might change my rankings a little bit. I'm not sure if I hate attaching numbers to stuff, but I certainly would not argue giving this a 7.5. I might even be in the same ballpark. But yeah, this it was just a weird ending to the season, unfortunately. But I really, really did enjoy a good deal of it. I really did enjoy this, and I've enjoyed reviewing every episode and every season up to this point. It's going to be a little bit weird. Season 5 is definitely all over the place. So I'm very curious to see how it's going to play all these years later.
For sure. And that's kind of our final closing thoughts on season 4. Felicia, God, bye Felicia, man, because it seems like the show has literally jumped the lizard once you left. But that's kind of unfortunate. But season 5, it seems like they're going to wrap up all these storylines, all the craziness with Madam Web, and some closure with Mary Jane. So, because the next episode, we're going to review season 5, episodes 1 through 3. And the first episode is going to be the wedding, which, Peter and Mary Jane get, tie the knot. So that's going to get interesting, obviously, with, Harry still out there. So it's going to get really, really interesting, and then really, really depressing towards the middle of the season. I don't want to spoil it, but I've been building up to it because, quote unquote, is that Mary Jane? But, that's it for this week. We'll talk to you next week. Thank you for listening. see you around.
So I'm assuming that if we are observing wrestling rules, then Spider-Man's going to throw cake in Harry's face, right?
Great. That probably does happen too, or something